Hi, my name's Sally Bothroyd. I'm a debut author based in Darwin. This is my first novel. It's a crime fiction called Brunswick Street Blues, and it's set in Melbourne, where I did live for a very long time. And it's a place close to my heart, and that's why I set my first novel here. Early on in the writing of this, I got a fellowship with the Varuna House in Katoomba, and it was such a great encouragement for a regional writer, feeling that I was being recognised and that, I should keep going. And finally, I got published thanks to the ASA HQ Prize for an unpublished manuscript, which is offered by this Australian Society of Authors in conjunction with Harlequin. So my book was published by Harlequin. And I'd like to read to you just from the very beginning to give you a bit of an idea of it. Set in October 2007. This wasn't the first time I'd encountered a dead body. Having grown up in inner Melbourne in the 1990s, when heroin was at its peak, I'd passed the occasional overdose junkie on the way to school. I couldn't immediately see the man's face, but this didn't look like an overdose stranger. The bright white hair made him unmistakable. It was Mayor Dicky Roughhead. His leering portrait hung in the foyer of the council's chambers, and when I took a few more steps towards the body, I could see that even in death he had the same smile on his smarmy, permatanned face, although his dentures were now on the floor among a scattering of bulldog clips, and I couldn't help noticing that his pinstripe trousers were down around his ankles. It was true that the mayor had been missing for several days, but no one seemed too concerned. Council gossip suggested his wife had sent him to rehab again for sex addiction or gambling, drinking, or possibly cocaine. The mayor was a man of varied interests. I took a closer look at his mottled face. Stroke or heart attack was my guess. On the plus side, the discovery explained the weird smell on the second floor of the council building, which had been a hot topic of discussion for several days. It had been mooted that a disgruntled ratepayer had hidden prawn heads in the aircon duct again. Of course, no one had checked the archive storage. No one had checked anywhere. Council staff were sticklers for job descriptions, and frowned on anyone who strayed outside their strict parameters. Even cleaning out the office fridge was unthinkable. I'd lived in Melbourne all my life. In 170 years, the city had grown from a scrawny settlement founded by the syphilitic son of a convict on the banks of the Yarra River to an unwieldy metropolis. I've heard it said that John Batman was the only person in Australia's colonial history to attempt a treaty with the Kulin people whose land he wanted. It was an unfair contract, of course, but that's bureaucracy for you. Recently, the city had become my employer, and as far as I could see, Batman's Act set the tone for Melbourne and the ongoing management of its boroughs. I had a PR job and I hated it, but the money was good and it was 9 to 5, which meant I could keep working nights for my Uncle Baz. He owned a pub in Fitzroy, an inner suburb just north of Melbourne City, known for its live music, coffee culture, and a football team that had moved to Brisbane in the 1990s due to money troubles. When I saw an advertisement for a job in the Yarra City Council's PR department, I figure it could help me find out who was behind a slew of complaints being levelled at Baz's pub. It seemed to me that someone at council, or someone with influence over council affairs, was very much hoping that Baz would sell up and move on. One of our regular bar patrons helped me fudge a CV and application letter. He'd worked in bureaucracy for decades and knew all the right buzzwords, and before I knew it, I had my foot in the door. But as it turned out, information was proving hard to come by. 3 months into the job, I was still struggling to get my head around the basics of PR, and I was no closer to uncovering any inside scoop regarding the complaints against Baz. So when I happened to learn that there was a store of council documents in an archive on the 3rd floor of the council building, I thought it wouldn't hurt to take a look. I waited until 5:10 when the building was mostly deserted, council workers not being fond of overtime. Then I got past the lock with the help of a lockpick kit I'd acquired from an old boyfriend, one I suspected of breaking into my apartment and stealing my stereo after we broke up. The archive room had high ceilings, and the light coming from the windows revealed faded paint and unloved plasterwork. Utilitarian shelves crowded the space, stacked to overflowing with cardboard box files, and one shelf at the far wall seemed to have collapsed completely. I'd closed the door behind me and had taken a few steps into the large room when I realised something was very wrong. There was a strange smell, and it was intensifying as I approached the area of the collapsed shelf. That's when I realised I wasn't alone, but I was the only one breathing. Maybe I should have rung the cops straight away, but among the things I've learnt from Uncle Baz over the years, one of the more important ones is that it's best not to get involved with the authorities if you can help it. I didn't want to explain how I'd found the corpse of a public official after gaining unauthorised access to the archives department. I closed the door and crept silently away.